Uh, so, Ross, tell us a little bit about ProPlate up in Minnesota. You all are sort of a different finishing operation than I think most people know, but tell us about ProPlate and the history of it and all that you serve.
Yeah, so ProPlate's been around for about 35 years. It's
Mhm.
privately owned, and the current ownership has owned it for about 25 years. We started working in all industries, like a lot of plating companies. We didn't have a primary focus, although we did serve the telecommunications industry. Went through that bubble at one time. We also served aerospace industry, and we're really a job shop for a good portion of our time. That was a difficult, like many plating companies and finishing companies can relate to, in terms of the cyclical nature of the markets that we served, especially in the aerospace market. We found it was very hard to maintain a sustainable growth. And so
Mm.
we started to look at our customer base and look for things that indicated some consistency. And we found that not only was there an opportunity within the medical device space, we also geographically fit really well into one of the
Mm.
med device hubs, being in Minnesota, California, Minnesota being probably the two
Mm.
largest hubs in the world, and also in the US. So about 15 years ago, we put the focus onto the medical device industry. We started going to trade shows,
Mhm.
listening to what the customer needs were, and found that we have some unique offerings already within our core capabilities, but then started to develop new offerings for that space. And I can kind of give a little bit of an overview of what
Sure.
some of those look like. Most of them have to do with selective plating to precious and semi-precious metals. The
Mhm.
applications range from surgical devices to implantables, and anything from a neurosurgery, like electric surgical forceps that requires silver plating for its thermal conductivity and electrical
Mhm.
conductivity. And then we also have some solutions around radiopaque marker bands and catheter devices. So the radiopaque marker bands and the catheter devices took our selective plating capabilities, which is a very precise CNC controlled process where we apply a liquid polymer to a component, and
Mhm.
then we can remove very precisely the areas on that component that we want to expose for plating, take it through the plating process, and then we can chemically strip away that liquid polymer.
Mm.
Uh, with that, we're usually plating platinum and gold for its
Mhm.
density, because under an X-ray or fluoroscopy, that shows up very bright, so that the physician can see exactly where that component is and even how it might be oriented.
Mm.
Uh, and then we started to find more applications in the plating on polymers world. So we,
Mm.
we explored that for specifically balloon applications, where we can deposit typically gold directly onto a balloon that's used again in a catheter device for ablation procedures, sensing,
Mm.
stimulation, you name it, whatever electrical circuitry might be used for in those applications, we can apply that. And we that actually expanded our capabilities in a whole new arena. So we
Right.
first tried plating on polymers, traditional wet chemistries, and then we shifted to actually a PVD process, and found that to be more useful in
Mm.
terms of being able to work with each and every polymer. That's one system that we can modify the process and get good adhesion to most industry standard polymers. Whereas if we worked with wet chemistries, we would need a different set of chemistry for every polymer, and it would take up a lot more, floor space. And then I'd say the last kind of innovation for the med device industry, which is also applicable to other markets too, is our neodymium iron boron plating capability
Mm.
that we developed as well. I believe we're one of the only companies in North America that have that capability,
Mhm.
as most of that happens overseas currently. So with some of the reshoring efforts and onshoring efforts going
Yeah.
on, that's been a real differentiator for us as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Something I read right after COVID was that the reshoring And I know that the medical components was one of the biggest things in the U.S. that read a lot about that. I know the people that did a lot of electropolishing and things were looking at that, of getting back into that if that work was coming back. I'm not sure if it has all yet, but it seems like it was making that move towards that.
Certainly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of trends as well as some vertical integrations going on in the especially in the medical device industry, where suppliers are looking for one-stop shops if they can find them.
Mm,
They're looking to reduce some of their supplier base to reduce some of the risk, but also then it's kind of counter. It's also important to have redundancies. So that's, I guess, a good segue into our expansion. Is
right.
it's more than twofold. There's a lot of advantages to it other than just simply needing more space.
Hmm.
But a lot of medical device companies would prefer that you have a redundancy, whether it's the equipment itself that you're working with or an actual physical location that's separate from that one. So that's actually going to be a good selling point for us, as well as, like I mentioned, the space. It's really hard for a company to come in and look at your facility and envision a big program being there
Right.
if there's not space for it. And currently, we're busting at the seams at a
Right.
12,000 square foot facility.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're going to be
Yeah, we can.
moving.
I was gonna say, let's mention that because this is right here in late July. You all are going from that to out of more than double, right, to about 38,000 plus. You're moving into a new facility, and yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's about 3 times or just over 3 times the size of our current facility.
Hmm.
It actually is only about 5 miles away, so the move is least complex as it can be, which isn't saying that it's not a big lift. But what we're doing is we're creating all new plating lines and essentially all new equipment, except for maybe some of the higher ticket items like our XRFs and things of that nature that we
Hmm.
can just shift over at the right time. So there's a lot of other benefits to this facility too. With the 3x square footage, we have about 5 times the office space, which seems to be one of our, I guess, biggest growing headcounts so far, as we add on more engineering staff and more salespeople, marketing people, and admin support type positions. But then also our production floor space is 3 times the size, as well as our R&D and new product development center. So we are going to have room to grow into it. I think we have about 7,000 square feet that is production space that has not been tagged for anything yet. Although there's many projects in the pipeline that will be a good fit for it. With the long sales cycles of medical device, those projects usually come in the pipeline at 2 to 4 years from the time that we start them. So we do have time to plan around for that. There's also additional
Right.
square footage to expand because we purchased the building and it has a great deal of land that comes with it.
Mm,
So if we do need to expand further, we can do that as well.
right.
And I'd say, some of the other highlights of the new building is um, we're going to have a fully air conditioned production floor. In the
Hmm.
past, we didn't have climate control. So not only is that good for our operators and employees, it's also good for the process. Every variable that we can control and not have the more humidity and a hotter
Right.
temperature in the summer and cooler and drier in the winter is helpful for maintaining that
Yeah.
control of the process. We're also putting a different type of water circulation system in where we're going to recirculate the water in all of our rinse tanks.
Hmm.
And that's going to cut down our usage by a measurable amount, very substantial. And then it's going to keep the tanks even cleaner, as well as
Right.
we're filtering it on incoming versus just the outgoing waste stream, the discharge. So
Mm,
that's going to help control our quality even to a higher degree. And everything will be DI water based versus just some of our baths in the older facility were DI water based.
wow. Yeah, great. I'm glad I'm not writing those checks for all this stuff. I mean, seems like this is a fairly complex of what you're doing. Certainly, the improvements there, right? How long did you all? How long have you been planning this move for this?
So we probably started shopping for a building two 2.5 years ago. I'd say
Hmm.
2.5 years ago, and it's been at least a year now that we've been planning, starting to build out, getting the contractors all organized, and we're having our grand opening here in just over a week, um,
Hmm.
and then we'll be fully operational in it within the next few months or so. Part of that lagging factor is the with the medical device industry that we work in and some of the customers that we serve, we have processes that are qualified on the equipment that we have here and the baths that
Hmm.
we have here. It's really a clone of that at the new facility to in terms of the chemistries are the same, the bath sizes are the same, and the equipment is the equivalent. So but we do have to work with each customer to make sure that if we do need to go through requalifications, we do that the right way, and we have operations working at the old facility as well as the new
Hmm.
facility, so we can make that transition. So that's probably why we won't make the full shift for maybe until the end of October.
Right, right. Kind of with that. I was going to say about 35 years you all have been around, correct? I mean, since that. How many years was it until you really started getting into the medical devices and this type of work? And like you said, I know you mentioned that you were kind of doing a lot of different industries, but how many years was it in that you guys kind of saw this light and decided this is what you probably wanted to shift to?
Yeah, so I guess I can relate it back to the present ownership. Craig Engels and Suzanne Engels
Hmm.
are the owners of the business, and I came into the business about 15 years ago myself, and that was around the same time that we started to look at that opportunity in the medical device world. And uh, from there, it takes a long time to work your way into it. You have to
Hmm.
establish your reputation. You have to really sharpen your tools, and you have to present yourself a little bit differently than what a plating company traditionally looks like.
Hmm.
But then also we found that you know the medical device world doesn't know what a lot about plating, um, but they do know a lot about the products that they're working on. And so we had to really change our marketing to be more product based, with our Visband technologies, our Metapoly technologies, which is what I mentioned before, the radiopaque marker band technology being Visband, which is the selective plating of
Hmm.
gold and platinum, and then our Metapoly technology being that PVD process to metallize circuitry onto typically balloons or other polymers for
Hmm.
medical devices. So that was a shift in our just how we marketed ourselves and how we sold to our customers, because they can grasp, okay, I need this radiopaque marker band, and this offers maybe more value, better features and benefits than the traditional ones.
Right.
And rather than just going to a trade show and saying we can offer plating, there's certainly plating opportunities in the medical device industry that are more traditional, ASTM standard specs, things of that nature. But we really strive to be innovators. That's one of our core values, is innovation. And so coming up with some of these new
Right.
technologies is really helping our bigger mission, which is to improve people's lives. And that's one of I think the most rewarding things about working in the med device industry is
Right.
we can we're not working on a widget that we don't really know what the primary function of it is, and what it's going into, which is a lot of the work that we used to do. Now we
Right.
know more in depth about what is this doing, who's the patient, and what's the impact for those patients and physicians and hospitals even.
Right, right. I was going to say that the name ProPlate sort of a misnomer because it seems like you more of an engineering organization, right? Who happens to know a lot about the finishing process. Which, going back, as you said, most of the people designing these things may not know a lot about the finished process of what needs to be done, and so it seems like it's a great marriage of having both of that engineering and finishing expertise that really partners well up with your customers, right? Who kind of need that. They may not have it in house, right? Is that the way you guys kind of see yourselves?
Certainly, I'd say several things. The first is that we're process managers. So, we're like you said, we're experts at what we do in terms of the metal finishing operations. But then also, we we don't just take on a standard spec with everything that we do. We certainly do that work, but a lot of
Hmm.
times our customers come to us with a result that they want to accomplish, and then we help them design the way to get to that result. And that's where we when I first started at ProPlate about 15 years ago, we didn't have an engineering department, although we had
Mm.
engineers. Craig Ingalls is an engineer, so the owner of the company really drove engineering into the company, but we didn't have a justification to have a pretty heavy burden department dedicated to just doing standard specifications. But once we got into these innovative areas where we're really making a new process almost each time that we take on a project from a customer, that's when we started to build out a full engineering team. And now we have, I want to say, about 5 or 6 engineers with a director of engineering, and some of them being with the company for up to 10 years. So it's a much different
Mm.
operation than we used to be, and it looks different. Our customer base is different, and even some of the tools that we use are very different. So
Mm.
we actually built our own in-house tooling department as well, so we could build our own
Mm.
fixtures, iterate them. We have 3D printing capabilities to help with the fixtures as well. We have laser capabilities as well to do some manufacturing. So there's a lot more under the hood than a typical plating company would have.
Right. Yeah. One thing I was intrigued with, I know you, when I was reading, this 6-step process that you have, right? When you're, I guess, working with newer customers or newer projects, where you really take it through and validate what's going to be going on, right? I mean, again, I think a lot of finishing operations would, they just get told this is what we want and this is the finish we want on it, and it seems like you kind of call a timeout. Let's make sure that this is what's going to work, and what technology is going to be needed for this. Is that kind of that process how that got developed?
Certainly, yeah, and we certainly didn't invent that process. It's pretty based on a lot of standards for medical device manufacturing, and so
Hmm.
we borrowed it. But adopting it for a finishing company was new to us at first. So it takes into account a lot of the risk-based approach that the medical device industry really lives by. They want consistency and repeatability, and then of course that results in safety and efficacy once the testing gets done. So we work with our customers. We make sure that we're aligned on what phase of the process they're on, whether it's the concept generation and discovery phase, or going into the proof of concept phase, and then there's validations after that, where we're not necessarily testing the process at that point, but we want to at least prove that that design concept of the plating works how it's intended to. And then typically the design gets frozen and we go into more of a qualification phase where we're ramping up the process for a full scale production. And then we're testing the highs and the lows of it to make sure that we know what our operating range is. And if we stay in that range, we can have repeatable and consistent and predictable outcomes.
Right. Yeah. And I guess a lot of this dictates a lot of you coming up with some proprietary finishes, right? You've got people that, I guess you have an R&D team that's really looking at that. I know you all have on your site a lot of the technology you all have really come up with and gotten patents on and those type of things. You deal with that a lot, right? I guess making sure you've got the right product to go on. If not, you work to make it the right product.
Yeah, we're not a company that often says no. We will say
Hmm.
no to a customer if we just know it can't be done.
Hmm.
But we like to challenge ourselves too. If we see that there's a benefit to the industry, and we think there's a way to figure something out, we all enjoy doing that type of work. So we get to live in that true sense of an R&D world where we're inventing new processes. Sometimes we're just taking concepts of different processes and combining them for a new outcome. So that's been a really fun path to be on, to be able to be involved in some of those projects too, and see, from start to finish what a concept can start as, and then actually be something that gets used in a medical device. And again, going back to the patient side of it, that's been some of the most rewarding work. We worked on a magnet project with a university, and there's a pediatric device that was a compassionate use device. And so there really is no other good option for these babies that are born with this condition.
Mm.
And one of the most rewarding things is when we're done with that project. That was the neodymium magnet plating project, where we encapsulated the magnet with plating and hermetically sealed it so that it could be safely implanted into the body. We were sent some pictures from that university of the babies that and the families that got to use that device successfully. So probably better than any annual bonus I've ever gotten.
Right. Well, I was going to say, these are super critical parts. And I'm sure, like I said, when you all go into some of these things that certainly, you have an idea of what it's going to do. And like you said, when you hear how it's saving lives, or it's improving lives, or it's correcting certain things that are happening with the human body, it puts a lot of weight, puts a lot of pressure on you guys, I'm sure, to make sure to make, as you're walking through the validation process, to make sure you can get it to work correctly and there's no adverse effects. You got to do all of that, which takes time, I'm sure, to do all that.
Yeah, I think the probably the biggest challenge initially was just shifting our culture. Slowing things down, and making sure that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and that we're ensuring the best of quality. Quality has always been built into our operations. That's how we built a good business before we really focused on the medical device industry. But similar to some of the aerospace requirements out there, or some of the defense requirements, or other industries that are pretty regulated, medical device is highly regulated as well, and for good reason. This is not something that's just going into a shower faucet or something that, if it fails, the worst case is somebody needs to
You go back to
replace
Home
their
Depot
faucet.
and get another one, right? This is the air margin is very, very slim on that. But it's funny. I mean, how in the segment you all are in, are there a lot of other competitors that you're dealing with that do exactly what you do, which is help with the engineering, help with the validations, and then actually finish the product that meet the exacting specifications?
To my knowledge, we really don't have any direct competition in that nature. Our biggest competition is probably just the alternatives that were before us. Some of the old methods and traditional ways of creating these features on these components, whether it be drawing precious metal tubing and then welding that marker band on to the assembly, versus us doing our selective direct deposition of plating right onto it. But we do have an advantage in a lot of those cases, whether it be cost driven or performance driven, or scalability driven. So it's an easy sell in terms of there really isn't a lot of competition today, and we do feel that, and we made these innovations listening to the customer needs. We didn't just come up with them thinking they were good ideas. We based them off of some of the problems in the industry. So in that regard, it makes my life and some of my business development team's lives easier in terms of selling when there really isn't any competition. And then it reduces some of the risk down the road for us of losing that business, because typically we'll be qualified as a sole supplier. And so it is difficult to transition that elsewhere, and we don't get commoditized for what the value that we're providing.
Right. And then again, like you said, at the end of the day, you do have a face to the people that you're producing these parts for, and talk about patients, right, and the lives. And again, that's got to be, at the end of the day, that's got to be something that seems very rewarding for everybody there to do that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we go over our core values every month. We have a monthly meeting with the whole company, and we reward our team on it, and that all goes into it. And then we also talk with the whole company about what what are the new devices that we're working on, and some of the companies that we might be working with, because a lot of times our R&D and our engineering team and then the business development team, we get to see and hear about those things. But I think it's really important for the rest of the organization to understand the impact that they're making on the world as well, so that they know, what they do every day. They can go home and be proud to share it with their families as well.